Hello and welcome to the AI Paradox webinar delivered by Data Literacy Academy and in partnership with Oakland. We're going to be talking today about the human intelligence for AI success. So welcome panel. Let's get started. If I can get us started, that is. So I'm Katie Gubler, Director of Education and Data, with a keen interest in accessibility and literacy for all things data and AI for everyone. I'm really passionate about knowledge sharing and collective societal readiness and growth for the future workforce. Formerly held senior positions and data roles in the Royal College of Nursing, the public sector and the legal sector. And I'm joined today by my phenomenal panel made up of Nick, Mike and Faye, who I'll pass over to now to introduce themselves. So Nick, would you go first for me?
Sure. So as Katie mentioned, my name is Nick. I run innovation and AI at Data Literacy Academy. In terms of my background, so I've had sort of quite a variety of different roles, mostly in commercial roles. However, I'm a massive AI enthusiast. So I've been playing with AI since probably the launch of ChatGPT was probably the big moment for me where I really tuned into that sort of space. And I think in terms of, my commercial background, that's really allowed me to apply my sort of enthusiasm and understanding for AI and tech to actually solving real business problems. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mike, you go next for me.
Yeah, hi everybody. How you doing? I'm Mike LG. That's completely fine. I'm the principal developer advocate at the Oakland Group. We're a data consultancy. Though I am here in my role as the AI innovation lead. I am piloting a number of programs within Oakland to push out the use of generative AI and other machine learning, algorithmically driven decision-making processes to our clients to help them make decisions better. In terms of my background, I've been actively building stuff in the data space for nearly a decade now. And prior to that, I taught secondary physics to children from 11 to 18. But it's the data thing that we're here for today.
It's all interconnected, isn't it? So Faye, over to you, please.
Thanks, Katie, and hi everybody. Great to be here today. So I'm Faye. I'm head of data science at ITV, which hopefully you all heard of, but we're one of the main UK public service broadcasters, creating both linear and on-demand content for you all to enjoy. So in my role at ITV, my team provide machine learning products to our marketing, content, and product teams. So really across the whole breadth of the company. In terms of my background, I've been in data science for a few years now, but prior to that, I spent several years as an academic researcher, specifically working in the area of developmental psychology, and that's my kind of take on data science. So how can we use behavioural science and AI to basically try and guess what people are going to do, which is quite hard, as many of you will know. And that's me. Thanks, Katie.
Super exciting. Thank you all for your introductions. What I will say is that we encourage questions, get them in the chat, do the Q&A. I'm going to save them till the end. As you might gather, we get quite passionate about this subject and we bounce off each other. My role is going to try and curtail that to the time that we've got here, but we will be taking all questions and any outreach questions will follow up afterwards as well. So please get them in there. Even if we don't get to them today, we will follow up. And thank you to Sarah in the background, who is going to be coordinating all of that for us as well. So let's get started. AI is powerful. We all know that, right? But without human intelligence and data literacy, it fails to deliver real business impact. And we're going to focus on the practical, commercially relevant insights for that AI success. And like I said, I'll do my best to keep us on that track. But we are a real excitable bunch in this area. So let's see what the session outcomes look like then. So the first one is really why AI needs data literacy. So it's all about understanding why AI success depends on those data literate teams. You wouldn't have joined our webinar, I don't suspect, if you hadn't have made that link to data literacy already. Just see it in the title. But we're also talking about that balancing tech, the process and the people, along with risks and opportunities that AI brings, and also really honing in on that human factor of AI in business and how we get that oversight to work for us as well. So I'm going to start off my first question then, and we do hear it everywhere. We hear nothing but AI now, and it has seamlessly infiltrated our lives. So why is it so important in business today? And I'm going to start with you, Faye, because it has been in your business quite some time and really has changed how we behave and interact. And to call on your previous academic world, Why is it that important?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. I think now more than ever that the pace that things are changing, I think everybody can see that, especially with generative AI. So ultimately, regardless of your industry, to remain competitive, AI really has to be in the mix. So for us, that's giving our viewers the most, fantastic experience on platform. It's giving them really personalized and fantastic marketing. It's allowing our business to make data-driven decisions. All of those things we could do before, but AI makes them a lot more powerful. And ultimately being really innovative as well. So we're in a really competitive industry, like I'm sure many others are. And we don't just want to be keeping up with Netflix and Amazon. We want to be, innovating and moving ahead. With that in mind, though, I think it's worth just clarifying that for us, the majority, I'd say like 80% of our capacity and time is still very much spent on that traditional machine learning, where there's still a huge amount of value. And we're really just starting to kind of proof of concept and dabble with Gen AI. But for us, the focus, is still very much on the more traditional side.
And Mike, you went, when you did your introduction, you spoke about being a data consultancy and working with lots of other businesses and industries. What else do you want to add to that about really why is it that important now?
So it's probably best to step one pace backwards, if that's all right, and look at what like AI is good for. So we've got, as Faye alluded to, kind of the hidden elephant here, which is that there are two tranches of AI that we're going to talk about today. And there's sort of, and I hate to say this because it's mental to me that this is the categorization that we put it in, but there is traditional machine learning, which was cutting edge years ago, by which I mean like 2 or 3. And so that's now traditional, allegedly, in the data space. But we've got that. Yeah, historic. Let's go with that. Historic machine learning. So all of those algorithms are very well established. And as Faye has said, are the decisions that you can make off the back of those algorithms are very well worn. We're not going to sit here and argue and tell you over and over again that machine learning is good for business if you have your data correct, because that's obviously true and is being leveraged by companies like ITV all of the time. There's the new beast then over here, which is generative AI. And that has come around in the last couple of years. Obviously, the first on the scene was ChatGPT. And then a number of other large language models that have come after that, open source, closed source, open weight, closed weight, all of that good stuff. But what that's really good at is digesting large quantities of information to help you make decisions. And that is generally in the sort of textual form. And that's what we're going to be, or at least what I'm going to be talking about today, is that kind of like massive ingestion of textual information to help you make decisions. And because businesses in general have this documentation mountain problem, that is why it is important, because businesses have this vast quantity of unstructured data that they somehow need to access. And that's where large language models come in.
And that sort of seamlessly works into what we've really seen a benefit to help our work and engagement at Data Literacy Academy as well. And it's become apparent from that improvement in compute cost and power that's made this really accessible. So Nick, how are you implementing that with us, and what's that success look like for us? Because obviously I know that and I see it, but it'd be great for you to share some of those key use cases and benefits with everybody else.
Sure. So I think for me, sort of bridging from Mike's point there, I think why is AI important? It's because it's really a sort of next step up in terms of how we interact with data, how we manipulate it, and how we use it to help with our problem solving. So yes, I think it's important to say that I think we're still quite early on it in corporate terms on the AI journey. So a lot of organizations are still thinking about their data quality, governance, and infrastructure, but where's that leading to? It's leading to a reframing of how we work with data. So if you think about how you would typically work with data, you might spend a lot of time manually analyzing rows of numbers, information. AI, and particularly LLMs and natural language processors, allow us to really sort of start to interrogate that data from a much broader perspective. So instead of having to really dig deep into all of your data sets, actually you can sort of think about it from almost a higher plane and start to interrogate it in a much more meaningful way. So in terms of how we've implemented that at Data Literacy Academy, it means that we now have a completely different way that we access all of our company information and documents, right? So instead of having to read, 20-page PDFs on a particular piece of research you were doing, you might put it into an LLM and ask it to give you a summary dependent on the sort of output you're looking to get from it. Not just read this document and summarize it, but read this document and give me the perspective on this particular topic or this particular subject. So for us really, and the benefit of working in a startup where we can be a little bit more agile than some of our enterprise sort of other businesses, is that we really can quickly reframe how all of our employees use and access data across the company.
Thank you. So in terms of the personalization that Faye covered, that competitive advantage, that real world impact of speed, complexity, ability to do things differently and add value, I think that leads me into the next question really. So moving on from why is it important to what does data literacy actually have to do with it? So what does this mean to you when we talk about being able to enable AI really? Nick, do you want to carry on that point you were just making about that quality and take us further on that journey?
Sure. So I think I'm going to sort of tackle this from a sort of again a step backwards, if you like. So for me, and one thing we do really well at Data Literacy Academy is we don't see data literacy as purely a technical problem. It's really a cultural problem, and it really starts at the cognitive level. So for me, using AI really is a cognitive amplifier. It's not really so much about the hard work we're doing within a data set. It's really about how we think about data, how we leverage data within the activities or the decisions that we're trying to make. So, at Data Literacy Academy, one of the big things we teach our learners is how to question, interpret, and contextualize information. And AI is fantastic for that because it allows us to amplify how we solve problems in a business context, but also if you use AI in a personal context. So for me, what that really sort of speaks to is people need to know how data is collected, how it's processed and representative, because really, if you're working with the outputs of AI, you don't want to come into it blind. You don't want to blindly trust what it's giving to you. You need to understand how it's actually working with data, where it's come from, how it's processing it, and also sort of how it's giving it back to you. The last thing you want is to sort of blindly trust an AI output to start making a business decision.
We're going to come back to that trust element in a bit, aren't we? So yeah.
Absolutely. So for me, it's really, data literacy is fundamental to working with AI because AI is that next, like I said, the next step of working with data. So if you're not data literate, you are going to blindly trust AI outputs. You're not going to think critically about the decision or the thing that you're trying to do and how AI is helping that, but also how AI might be hindering that. So I guess that's sort of my perspective on this question.
How does that manifest itself out in business terms then, in the work that you're doing? How do you see that importance of data literacy in the workplace to enable this?
Yeah, as a data science team, we see that as being a large part of our responsibility. So we are not a back-end data science team at all. You have to get your team into the business. You have to get your data scientists physically sitting next to your partners and stakeholders in the office while they're using your tools. We do that a lot, and we take it very much from a bottom-up approach. So of course we have, meetings with our chiefs and our directors, but getting your operational teams and staff to understand what's happening under the hood, even if it's a relatively simple propensity model, churn modeling, that kind of thing, understanding what's happening intuitively is so important. And we actually recently, I've got a nice example of this. We had a member of our marketing team who came to me and said, I really enjoyed working with your data science team. We have these models in production. I think AI and marketing is really powerful. Like, what do I do? How do I learn more? Which was amazing for me because it was testament to our team and the fact they were getting out there. But what we've now done is set up like quite a formal mentoring partnership between that individual and someone from my team. So they're now learning how machine learning works and we're, digging deeper into their team. But the point of all that and why that's so important is that individual, when they get that data literacy and that intuition, they are the people who are best placed to identify use cases. It's not my team, we'll have a good crack at it, but really they're the ones that know our viewers, know our data, know how marketing works, and that's fundamentally why it's important, because they're the ones that can come to you and say, I've got this idea, and that's where the value comes.
Just love that curiosity and that shift of how you describe that behavior change. And it's not like, oh no, we've got more of this work to do. Oh no, I'm scared of this. It's like, tell me more. I'm enthused by it. I'm excited. I just love
I
that.
was doing cartwheels, yeah.
It's like, yes, that's a win. Yeah, so you must see that too, right, Mike, with looking at the strategic picture in the work that Oakland do, and that application of, your enthusiasm for it transpires across the work that you do. What do you see in why data literacy matters in making that AI work?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. And there's a drum I'm going to beat like continually for the next 45 minutes, which is that if you're going to bring the gospel of AI to people, you need to give them decisions they can believe in. Because the AI, if you have, so my major lessons from putting a couple of AI projects into production for our clients is that this brings the end user closer to the data itself than they ever have been before. And that is good and also scary, because they're now going to ask questions about that data itself, which is fantastic. And Faye has seen that in ITV as people get more curious about why these decisions and why these presentations of data are actually being given to them. But what it does require is that you have a better understanding of what that data is in your users. So if you're doing, say, retrieval augmented generation, which is large language models backed on the vast quantity of text files we talked about earlier, they're going to ask questions about why that data is in that format and what is in those text files. And it may or may not be correct. And it's not good enough anymore because the AI doesn't know what is correct and incorrect. It only knows what's in the data and what's not in the data. That if there are things that are not correct inside that data, that's going to be exposed extremely quickly. So your users need to have an understanding of what's in the data sets, why it's there, is it correct, who put it there, and that full train through all the way from data collection right the way through to AI processing and then presentation to the end user. The people who use your products at least have to have a notional understanding of how that data got in front of them, or else they're not going to believe the decisions that you would like them to take.
Just called out something there that's really important when we think about and talk about data literacy, that it isn't just about the data itself, that it's about the wraparound and the key components that go with it. So really good record keeping when things change. What do we mean? That sort of those business rules, those glossaries, that terminology, all of the products and the importance of not just the data itself, but that whole lineage, the transparency, the decision making that can be based on it. And I think that's all the caveats that come with it, right? That's all the pieces of the puzzle that you also need to know. It's not just about understanding what different data types there are. It's understanding the context that they live in as well. So yeah, that's awesome. Right. So let me take you through the challenges we see it, because Faye, you covered this brilliantly in just your use case example there that you gave us, and Mike, you've referred to it a bit there as well. And I'm sure quite a lot of the people that have joined this webinar will have heard this a lot of times, because it's something that we talk about on practically every call, every engagement we have, because it's really important to us. But it still exists. There's still two clear camps in business. You have, and Greg talks about it all the time, in terms of the data literacy problem. But it transpires into an AI literacy problem also in exactly the same way. So we have on one side, on the left side, those who get it. They have all the fancy buzzwords, and we like to use them today too, and we'll call those out when we hear them. But that have been playing with AI concepts and products and solutions for quite some time. Like Mike said, he jokingly said 2 years, but we're talking 10, 15 years of at least that hardcore stuff. But you don't have the necessary visibility or awareness or business language to bring that magic out and to make those game-changing capabilities in the way that Faye, you described it. You're not as close to those customers or those processes or practices that happen in operations every day. And to win over sort of those decision makers and build trust across the business, you need that really close partnership. And then on the right-hand side, we have those who do make those decisions, those very same decision makers and business professionals who hear about what AI can do, but don't always have the awareness and the language to really engage beyond speeding up narrow ways of working. So the use cases that came out first was about, I can improve the way that I work today. But actually the value really comes from unlocking and enabling that sort of left-hand side to bring to life that business vision, to drive that business improvement, that competitive advantage, and opportunities for deep differentiation or personalization or whatever it is in business that you're trying to achieve. So we have this two-sided knowledge and two-sided communication gap. And like I said, it's not just in that data literacy space anymore, but it's that growing space in AI literacy as well, and knowing what some of that language looks like, how we can really get a return on any investment that we're putting into this AI development work. And the most successful implementation and adoption are those who can literally bring those sides together. And Faye's described it there about sitting side by side with those in operational usage day in and day out to really form great business working relationships, and being able to demonstrate that impact through use cases that bring it to life, that it isn't just talking about sort of multilinear regression or something, but it actually means something out in practice. And that's how we get to that great AI product and teams working together. So just to call back on you specifically, Faye, at this point, and my question was going to be, do you see this already today? And you've covered that, but what now, based on how I've just described it, do you think that this is really adding value in addition to what you've just said about sitting side by side?
How is this adding value?
Yeah, so going beyond just the operational act of sitting side by side, but actually what difference is it making in the outputs and outcomes for that investment you're making?
Yeah, it's massive. It's massive. And I guess, like I say, as a data science team, we take that as our responsibility, but you've got to come at it from different angles. So formal training, like what you guys do, is obviously critical as well. It definitely makes a difference. I think it's important to say that progress is slow as well. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. So I've been at ITV 3 years, and that's pretty much the length of the team in its current form. There was data science before, but it was a bit different. And you're looking at least a year and a half, really, until that trust, and we've mentioned that a few times at different levels. It takes time until that forms. So yeah, huge value here. I think also, if there are any leaders on the call of data science teams, making space and making capacity for that, and upskilling if it's needed, because data science is a really broad term and we all have different skill sets. So if you are sat there thinking that this is maybe something you're not doing and it's a gap, I would really encourage you to upskill your team and support them in getting stuck in and really going out into the business.
Do you know what, we hear it all the time with all of the big customers and clients that we work with, is that often, because the data science team or analytics teams are quite small in number, that being able to get that reach out to the business, and that's part of where we get really involved in being able to just enable and to promote through sort of that partnership working, how we deliver the vision, that engagement, that sort of working practices at mass. So yeah, that's definitely one of the key things, is just being visible and signposting and engagement, and that brand awareness bit of the data team exists, and this is how you can engage with it and work closely together. So we get that all the time. So how do you get there then? So, well, we see it as progressing along this curve, and we notice the first mistake that often people make is that they go in with teaching experts to become more expert, right? So data people learning more about AI and hard skills and data science, because that's the passion area, they will do that anyway. That is always part of the process. But what that often does is it leaves the business professionals to become more expert in their business areas, but not necessarily recognizing the impact that data literacy and AI can have on their world. So becoming, I know you described it slightly different at ITV, but marketeers becoming more ingrained in marketeering and products off the shelf, rather than engagement with their own sort of data teams and seeing about how that works internally is often a common problem. But what we want to make sure that is key to that success is starting with common understanding, language in both those camps that I described. So bringing them together internally in a business, so that shared language is much more about the nuance to that company, and making sure that works in practice, not just something off the shelf that says, here's all the buzzwords and here's all the meaning, and then to find out that you've got different data governance principles, or you've got different approaches that have happened naturally and organically within a company. So it's about really bringing that confidence with data, language, but also business acumen, and the business professionals building up that foundational knowledge to be able to just ask the right questions and describe the problems that they're facing and explore those solutions together. So Mike, based on your expertise in relation to this, where do you see that people are progressing through that curve at the moment, and how far along do you think we actually are?
It's a really interesting one. And there's a lot of I think people fall over at the first step. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what that common understanding actually is, in terms of what does it mean to take a data-driven decision. And there's a sort of responsibility that we have to come backwards down the curve. So if we imagine that, like, so it's not just that we can place individual companies on this curve, we can place individual people inside companies on this curve as well. We have a certain amount of responsibility to come backwards on the curve and help people to understand, really, like, philosophically, what does it mean to make a data-driven decision? Because a data-driven decision is one where, you know, you've set your parameters in advance and you have evidence for the reason that you took the decision that you made. It's not just looking at KPIs and thinking, whoa, they all feel bad, we should do this thing over here. It's actually in advance saying, when these measures get to this level, that is the moment that we will act. And that's a real true data-driven decision. And that's a point that many teams have not quite got their head around yet. However, they have kind of jumped forward as well to go, how can we implement AI to help us make these decisions? So there's a certain amount of, like, coming backwards down the curve that we have to do to really help people understand from a strategic and philosophical level, like, what does it mean to make decisions with data? And there are a number of things that we can do to help that, but I suspect that we're going to touch on those in the next half hour.
Yeah, certainly are. And you've just called, like, I've came straight to this session from teaching and working with Aston Uni, and actually we cover this in quite a lot of depth about, there's almost a fear that we've driven so much to the language of becoming data driven in our decision making that all the other components that make up decision making are bad. Like, so actually we talk a lot about, there's still an importance for intuition that will allow you to build a hypothesis. You know, there's still a lot of domain knowledge and expertise from a field that people have grown up around time to lead them to a point that then becomes more data informed or data guided to test out those hypotheses or that thinking process. But to your point, like, the ability to go back and reflect on it and go, actually, we made a decision, we now know more information, or we've now got more understanding of it. That was the right decision at that point in time. It isn't the right decision now. But if you take it as a pure moment in time data driven decision today, you almost lose that context and that behavioral science piece that that helps us understand why we made decisions in a moment and that practice. So Faye, do you have anything else you want to add to this before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, just, I mean, echoing and agreeing with everything you said. I think the idea of going back down the curve is interesting, actually. And I'm looking at this and thinking that there's some things there that maybe we could do and we could revisit. So I think that's a fair point by Mike. Yeah, nothing else from me.
Thank you. So let's talk about that part about those overcoming some of those obstacles then. So we're forever growing and developing the ways of working. So I'll start with Mike and then on to you, Faye, and then we'll close this question off, Nick, with you. But how can we overcome those obstacles and mitigate risks on our AI journey then? So what's one key risk or obstacle you faced?
Well, I mean, so I'm going to, again, and I promise to do this, I'm going to continue to do it, give people decisions they can believe in. And that largely comes around transparency and governance. And we'll talk about transparency here, because I think we've talked about governance already kind of enough. When you build products with generative AI, you have a certain amount of responsibility to make sure that people can understand how that AI got to the answer it got to, whether it's in an agentic framework doing something extremely fancy with like LangChain or Crew AI or semantic kernel, or whether it's, you know, the slightly simpler end of retrieval augmented generation. You have to show your end users how that result was got to. And that can come through citations. It can come through, one of the fancier things we've done is we have streamed in the the actual, like, what is the output of the AI in the intermediary processes, and given users optional ability to see that process that is going on underneath the hood, so to speak, as it queried many tables and many data sources and pieces of text to come to the answer that it came to. Because you're really, really trying to get people to believe in your decisions, understand how they were got to, and the particular risk in the large language model space is that of hallucination. Those models are extremely convincing and will chat rubbish if you don't give them very firm technical guardrails that you have tested. And so, again, you have that responsibility to show how decisions were come to, so that people can, although as a developer, you should have minimized the risk of hallucinations. People can understand if a hallucination occurs, why it happened, and you can fight against it in the next release.
Call back to the even just the language of what you've described there for the general business user. Like, there is that reliance on the developer to build it out and to put the prompt in the right place, and to make sure that that isn't the natural go-to, but it's so confident, and the general user, without having that sort of literacy and understanding of that even being a concept and why it does that, to your point of really understanding what is going on to believe that outcome, it's just so easy to fall into that trap and to jump to a conclusion that's inaccurate or misleading. So
and a huge problem. I mean, something that the biggest companies in the world are fighting. You only have to look at, like, the Apple's problem with Apple Intelligence or Google's search results to show that this is not a solved or easy problem to deal with.
carries loads of risk too, like human risk, like actual people stuff. So how about you, Faye? What do you see through that implementation of your growing data science team, of being around for quite some time on that journey together? And what are the obstacles to overcome and the risks to mitigate?
Yeah, I'm going to build on Mike's point because I think it's so important, and I see it as the biggest risk. So I mentioned before that we've started dabbling with generative AI, or more specifically retrieval augmented generation, which Mike alluded to, past 6 months or so. And I think even if you think about something like ChatGPT, you are faced with what looks like a really simple UI. Put a question in, you get something back. And without an understanding of what's happening under the hood, that makes me really nervous. And I actually think there are a couple of quite practical things that everybody in a business should be aware of. Watching some of Mike's videos for a start, for those who've seen them. But, you know, the simple thing of, like, a large language model and next word prediction, like just some of those basic concepts, because when you start getting hallucinations or just really weird answers, if you know how they work, it allows you to not, you know, almost, it stops people from disengaging and thinking it's rubbish, don't want to use it. If you understand why those mistakes have happened, that helps. Another big one for me is an intuition around the probabilistic nature of large language models. And there's some really great videos and resources out there again on this. But the simple idea that if you put the same prompt in twice, you're not going to get the same answer. The thread might be the same, but you're not going to get the exact same words back. And even that might seem quite simple to some people, but that was a revelation for some of our colleagues, because they had the perception that, you know, prompt in, answer. And then my third one that I'm banging the drum about at the moment is the use of generative AI for quantitative data analysis, right? So on LinkedIn, like, oh, I gave ChatGPT this really complicated mathematical equation and it couldn't solve it out of the box. Well, no, because that's not what it's designed to do. It's designed to predict language. Yes, those models can take a natural input, create SQL or Python code and analyze data, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. So Mike was saying before that by and large, the way that him and his partners use it is for text data, for that really high value use case of augmenting text data. So yeah, those basic things, just making sure that, like, I don't think they're principles that anybody in a business can't get their head around. So challenge your people, get them up to that level of understanding with those basic intuitions, and don't let them use it for quantitative analysis unless you're really sure that it's doing what you want it to do.
Just basic counting. Just don't let it count number of words.
Yeah.
You can't even count number of words.
It's
Like,
in the
even
name. It's a
even in
language
that
model,
space.
right? Yeah, it makes me really
Yeah.
nervous. I'm sure. Look, this is for where we are now. I'm of course not saying that in time to come, it's an incredibly powerful tool. So I'm not naive to that. But in my opinion, for where we are right now, I think huge caution needs to be taken around that without the relevant fine tuning.
And it's really interesting in that even just in this conversation, we hear it all the time. I think there's that easy assumption that when we say AI, instantly now the majority of experience is Gen AI, and actually the world of machine learning and the development of statistical processing and all of the other really excellent sort of data science tools, techniques, skills. Are almost shied away from a little bit when we talk about AI, and haven't been that catch-all conversation. We've spoken about a lot about it recently, Faye, haven't we? Of what do we actually mean when we say AI, and that's where this comes into making it accessible.
And using it when it's appropriate. So you have like what a colleague of mine calls the data science onion, right? But you start broad, and then you end up in that really specific Gen AI. But as you move towards generative AI, things get more expensive generally. To Mike's point, you lose that level of explainability. There's also an environmental impact to think about as well. So yeah, it's using it where it's appropriate and not just kind of, sticking it on top.
That's key. It's that, yeah, there's more obstacles and risks to mitigate other than just the internal nature of that AI, right? Nick, you've waited so patiently. I'm so I'm so keen to get you back into this conversation, because we're talking here about the obstacles and the mitigating the risks, and then we're going to move on to sort of it's not all just doom and gloom, and your world is about innovation and excitement and that opportunity. But you're not shy to some of those challenges that you faced also. So tell me a bit more about your view to this question about obstacles first, and then I'm going to go straight in with the innovation from you as well. So
sure, absolutely, no pressure. So I've got reams of bullet points on my preparation for this on that point that Mike made about transparency, which I'm just going to have to completely throw out now. But I'll use this point just to say, yeah, what Mike talked about with regards to transparency and visibility is so important. Moving aside from that, I think one angle that is really important to talk about is this idea of secret cyborgs. We've already, we've just touched on between you and Faye about how Gen AI is everywhere. We all have access to it. ChatGPT is now integrated on the Apple ecosystem. It's on our iPhones. It's being sort of thrown in our face in almost every single tool that we use in business and personally. AI is everywhere. What that means is, I saw a study recently on the BBC, which was all about how 40% of business users are currently using AI in a personal capacity. Now, the risk here really is being too slow to move and too slow to set up within your business and within your organization a secure, safe space where people can use AI, can play with AI, can test it. One thing I've seen at previous companies I've worked at is, because of that lack of safe space, secure space where information is locked off from going back into the database to train new models, employees are just turning to their own personal ChatGPT accounts or using Gemini, etc., etc. So I think the risk here is actually, yes, we don't want to rush full on into AI implementation. Yes, we need to be careful about governance, about data quality and things like that. But actually, it's really, really important that you provide your employees with a safe space for them to test AI. So whatever capacity that's in, maybe it's an AI platform that you've developed yourself, maybe it's a pro ChatGPT account, whatever the case may be, is make sure that they've got a space where they can experiment and play with it in a data secure environment. And I think the other risk really is this misconception that AI will solve everything. AI can't solve everything, right? My perspective on AI is, yes, I really, really do champion and parrot the benefits that AI can bring. I think AI could massively help improve the world around us, improve the things we're working on in business. But I'm also very, very reticent to the challenges. And one of the biggest challenges is this sort of uncritical acceptance of AI output. So some of you guys touched on this a little bit earlier, but not actually being critical of what's in front of you. As we've discussed, LLMs can really dress up misinformation really authoritatively, right? If you don't understand how it came to that conclusion, or don't, have the willingness or the mindset to actually question what's in front of you, then that can only amplify the misinformation. But I'm going to bring sort of, again, quite a broad concept in here, which is climate change. So one of the things that we talk about AI solving is climate change. I always find that a really, really sort of difficult sort of question to pose, because I would argue that we already know how to solve climate change, right? It's mostly around reducing emissions. AI can probably tell us how to reduce emissions, but that's not actually going to then go and solve the problem. The problem of climate change and the problem with using AI insight and making decisions and actually making change with it is having clear leadership and clear buy-in to actually as strategic direction, right? With climate change, the problem isn't really how, it's about all of these sort of leaders within the international space actually agreeing on should we be doing this? Should we not? Same with AI. You need clear leadership and clear strategic direction for actually what are you trying to solve with AI? What are the business problems that we're trying to solve? How are we going to get ROI within our department or within our organization? So it's really clear that yes, AI is great because it really enhances employees from the bottom up, but that really needs to sort of be in parallel with top-down leadership on what you're trying to accomplish and having the requisite trust and buy-in from your leadership to actually follow through on delivering that.
You're going to get super brownie points from Lisa if she's watching. I'm just going to say that out now. So the first thing she would have reported on is on the sustainability piece, and Faye, you touched on it before. I'm going to use Mike's time machine of earlier where he was like, let me go back a point, because I think there was a really key section in the middle that was about that generational acceptance and how technology moves on and that questionability of critical thinking. And it just occurred to me when you were saying that, Nick, that there's little things that just happen, right? That change around us, that my kids now don't put a phone to their ear ever. They literally hold it in their face because they're so used to like FaceTime, having video calls. So when somebody phones and they can't see them, they get quite confused. Like, they're like, where are you? Why can't I see you? And picking up an actual traditional phone is quite unusual.
Yeah.
And I'm worried that as it is so integrated into everything that we do now, that that transparency is lost, that it just doesn't exist anymore, and that reality shifts. So any thoughts from any of you on the points about that as a risk or as an obstacle that can be mitigated?
I think that's a really interesting sort of perspective on it. So I can take that back to another sort of context from my personal experience, which is at a previous company I worked at, big enterprise company. I really struggled with communication there because a lot of the people within that company were basically running the business through Outlook. Every communication, big or small, would go through Outlook. Every attachment would be sent through Outlook. Now, that's probably a reflection of how they grew up, right? There was a generation before me who grew up sending letters, right? Sending letters to one another, and email was effectively the tech replacement for letter writing. Now, I'm of a different generation. I can just about remember sending letters when I was a kid, but only for birthdays and things like that. I've never sent a letter for an actual reason, a real reason. So I grew up using instant messaging, so things like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and things like that, and that's reflected in how I work, just like you said, Katie. So I'm someone who much prefers instantaneous messaging because for me, it's a much quicker way to do it. But the important thing there is actually it's not about what's better, because yes, instant messaging is probably better for instant communication. It's the cultural perspective, right? It's what are you used to? And then how can you actually help people to overcome what they're culturally used to then embrace new technology? And I think with AI, it's really, for me at least, I think it really is about ensuring that data literacy is something we can really bring to young people as soon as possible. So for example, some of the charity work we're doing at Data Literacy Academies will also be going into a school to help with that exact problem, right? And it's so important that we're not just giving AI to young people and new business users and saying, here you go off and use it, right? It's about teaching them not just AI use, but responsible AI use. And I think that really should come through with all of your new business users, right? Is don't just take AI as the magic bullet, but ensure that they know all these things we talked about, right? In terms of data quality, data governance, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm going to lift the mood now and then get us on to questions in a couple of minutes then. So what opportunities? Tell me all the good stuff. Tell me all the exciting, amazing things that you've heard and you're doing that really brings it to life, that, again, that make it not just about all of the risk and challenge. We know we've got that in hand. But what can we do? Why is this so important now to really get on the positive bandwagon?
I think for me, the biggest potential, there's so many opportunities that AI can unlock, right? So I could be here all day talking about the different opportunities, but I'll focus in on one thing specifically, which is this idea of qualitative data. So if we think about natural language processors and LLMs as being your typical gateway to AI, it's the trending way that users will interact with AI, whether that's powered by all of these different machine learning models or not. the way that we interact with it is typically going to be through an LLM and through natural language processing. Now, typically, historically, we thought about data as just being numbers. However, there's actually a huge amount of business information that is qualitative and unstructured. That could be customer feedback. It could be emails. It could be meeting notes. There is so much qualitative data out there, and AI is really exciting because it allows us to really, really extract so much value from all of this data sets that were previously unattainable unless we spent the time in our own heads reading them, trying to understand them, and then applying it to our work. So in terms of how natural language processing works, just to be very, very brief for anyone who would like to know, it uses things like text vectorization and embedding. So it effectively helps us to find patterns across different concepts and different words, just like we do in our own brains. Now, in terms of why that is really, really cool, to my mind, is it's tapping into this broad lake of data that is previously completely untapped and can offer us so much value. For example, one of the things that I do, and people in my company are probably sick and tired of hearing me bang this point over the head, just like Mike and his transparency, is I transcribe almost every single one of my internal meetings. Why do I do that? It's not so I can go back and gossip about what people are talking about in meetings. It's because it allows me to have a completely historical view of all the work that I've been doing in all the meetings, right? We don't sit in meetings just for the sake of it. We sit there to make decisions, to discuss points, to understand other people's perspective of what's going on in their team. That's now all captured, and then I can use that to then inform the decisions that I make later on. If we think about what we do at Data Literacy Academy, we're all about understanding our customers. We don't just deliver off-the-shelf data literacy programs. We really try and tailor it and customize it to our customers' specific needs, to their specific strategies, to make sure that we're not just giving them training, but we're giving them training that unlocks ROI and the real value they're looking for from data literacy. Now, we spend a lot of time with our customers getting to know them, getting to know their objectives, getting to know their wants, needs, and concerns. That is all captured qualitatively, right? You can't put a numeric value on all that information, but using things like AI, suddenly we can bring all of that information to another realm of analysis and use, right? We can think big picture in terms of finding patterns across all of that, or it could be small cases in terms of extracting the meaning from sort of individual captures of that sort of information. So for me, I won't bang on forever because I could, but qualitative data is the biggest opportunity for me in terms of AI.
I'm going to throw the ball to Faye just to build on that. See any exciting opportunities from your world that you're taking forward.
Yeah, I do agree with Nick, and when we chatted before about this, it seemed to be certainly a common thread. I think if we think back to the idea of allowing the people in your business to identify opportunities for AI, to Mike's point, I think that tabular data, for a few years now, people have been looking at it and thinking of opportunities, but you probably now got the chance to reframe the question and go out to the business and ask people, what text data are you sitting on? And if you had a magic wand, what do you want to do with it? What do you want to know? So in terms of that value gap, I agree completely. I think so Nick mentioned the speed, and that's absolutely true. I think it's also the area where it would physically be impossible for a human to process the information. So if we think about ITV, we have a content catalogue that has thousands of shows in there. So every show has metadata, it has synopses, it has subtitles. It would be physically impossible for someone to sit and connect those things together in a graph network. You might know that Corrie is similar to Emmerdale, of course, but you wouldn't be able to map the whole thing. So, and that's something that we're working on at the moment. How do we map all of that out in a more sophisticated way so that we can better understand and recommend things to people? I will just bang my drum as well, that of course NLP is not synonymous with Gen AI. There's some really brilliant machine learning NLP techniques that don't require Gen AI that can get you some fantastic insight. So again, it's just about using the right tool for the job.
And the right skill set. Sometimes, there's everybody isn't an expert just because that we're able to use the interface through a Gen AI. There's still a wealth of knowledge and experience and expertise that sit behind some of those real professional skill sets as well, isn't there? So Yeah. Just calling on that point, and last point from me on this one, it was game changing having come from public sector environments where you have things like public inquiries and you're gathering information that's historic records of handwritten notes of things that might have spanned 30, 40, 50 years ago. How that's enabling us to actually make informed decisions and be able to use just inaccessible scale of information where it would have recalled a person or 50 people or 100 people to read through every single document and highlight out things that had happened or decisions that had been made years and years ago. Like that as an opportunity, that as a piece of taking us forward as a race, and being able to work through some of those real problems that are at our public sector level, I think is just going to be game changing for the future. Mike, any final thoughts or opportunities on this space?
Oh boy. Okay. This is probably the last thing I'm going to say. So allow me to sell you the dream. Okay. Because let's just think about for a second what it means to, and this is, I'm just going to take us all into the philosophical realm for a sec. What does it mean to think? Okay. Because in general, large language models for routine business decisions are beginning to have the level of autonomy and the level of, and I'm going to use the word advisedly, and people will shout at me in the comments here, and I'm sure the attendees, at least some of our attendees will get annoyed because I'm about to say that large language models have a thought process. They don't. I understand it's all maths, it's all the maths all the way down to binary. Don't worry about it, doesn't matter. We're going to anthropomorphize them for a second. They have a thought process that we can access because the way that you and I think through difficult tasks is generally to talk ourselves through them. Large language models, if they're sufficiently equipped, can do that too. And so I would like to sell you the dream of the agentic workflow, which is where you have pieces of semi-autonomous software inside your business that are doing the boring crap that you don't want to do. If you have an Excel spreadsheet that is just nonsense every single time and has to be ingested, but it's different every single week when you have to ingest it, an agent is a great candidate for ingesting that thing. If you have a front end to your data science workflow where people ring you up and ask annoying questions, put an agent in the way that can do some light SQL, it can do some light tabular querying and come back to them with the sorts of ideas they might have, which will allow them to reframe their question. If you have a panel where people have to submit forms or papers to get through and they have to be of a certain standard, stick generative AI agents in the way to make sure that they have at least got the bar this high before they waste everybody's time with incomplete or wrongly formatted answers. That is the dream I would like to sell to you. That's where we're going with this.
I can see it. I can see it really well because the amount of times that you've had a conversation between a business team and those two camps, a business team and a data team, that said, I want this. And you go, I'll provide you that, but I don't think that's what you want. That's what I want. That's really what I want. And then all of a sudden you go, this is what I've given you. And they go, that's not what I want. I didn't ask for that. And that's exactly what you asked for. And it's that whole conversation. So I can see it, Mike. You've sold it. You've sold it to me.
Can I just add to Mike's point there? Because I think he's touched on something really, really important, which is when we think about the end state of AI, right? AI is getting fabulously more powerful within the space of weeks, months, think about years. It's going to be fantastically powerful. It enables humans to do what they're good at. If we think about your typical sales profile of, the profile of person you would put into a sales role, you don't hire them because they're probably going to be good at CRM management or data input and things like that. You hire a salesperson usually because they're good with people. They're good at selling to people. They're good at talking to people. They're good at all that warm stuff. And I won't go into this too much, but just to be brief, AI will enable us to do all the things that we enjoy, but also the things where we really add true value. And for me, that is like the biggest sort of bigger opportunity that AI can unlock in the future.
Awesome. So what oversight do we need to maintain then? So what role does human oversight play in realizing all of that full potential? Let me go, Nick to you first, just you finished off on that point before about oversight.
It's a good question. I think the main thing is recognizing when we need a human in the loop, just because AI can and will increasingly be able to do more things autonomously. It's really important to understand and recognize when you need that human in the loop. That could be to mitigate against bias. So as we know, AI is broadly speaking a pattern recognition sort of machine. We need humans to be there to be able to actually be able to pull out bias and be able to recognize it, because sometimes a pattern doesn't just necessarily mean truth. Sometimes there's a lot more complexity that needs to be involved. I think context is really important. And again, I'm talking quite broadly here, but it's always important to understand that AI cannot understand all of the context that we as humans know. So when I teach some of our internal users using how to use LLMs, I always say to it, don't just tell it what you want to do, but tell it what you're going to do with that information. What is the context that's going into it? Who is the company you work for? What are the tasks you're doing? So I think in terms of human oversight, I think it's really important to understand where we need humans to input that additional context that AI just won't be able to know because it doesn't have those right capture points. And I think for me as well, I think the most important sort of element of human oversight is, are we using it to make the right decisions? Do we have the right strategic direction in terms of the problems we're trying to solve and the things we're trying to fix? Do your internal users, are they using it for the right reasons? Are they using it in the right way? So I think it's a difficult question to answer, but and the problem is the goalpost is really shifting as AI improves. The place where human oversight needs to come into play also shifts. So it's something that is gradually shifting over time, right? But that's probably my input on this question.
Just because we can doesn't always mean that we should.
Indeed.
So Mike, Faye, any thoughts on human oversight and necessity?
Faye, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll make some quick points. I know we're tight on time. First is that not all businesses and industries are uniform. So if you're using AI, it's your responsibility to use all the resources that are out there that will allow you to pitch. So, if you're financial or medical, that's very different to me and my team. So what is the risk of AI? That's absolutely the first thing. The next one is the human in the loop and that kind of where you set that bar and how involved people are. It's not just about AI, it's about your people and the fear that may be instilled as you start to move that dial to the more autonomous. So involve your people in it and do it at the right pace. Mike?
Yeah, for me, it's where does the buck stop in your organization for any decision that you make? Where do you need and want to take accountability for your decisions? Because you can hand over decisions to an AI. You can do that. That's fine. Well, it's not fine, but you can. Should you is an interesting question. Nobody is going to love it if you, as Faye just alluded to, hand over medical decisions to a large language model at the moment. And then when you misdiagnose somebody, go, well, the machine said that this was the right course of action. That's clearly unacceptable. You need an actual human to take accountability for the decision that was made there. So you need to decide for yourself, both from a regulatory and like a business perspective, where does the buck stop? And at what point do you need that human to take accountability for the decision? Because that's where you'll need them. And
that takes some doing right. I'm going to fold us on to the last quick fire round question. And I just want not even 30 seconds, like 5-second answer to this one. And then I'm going to pick up the few questions that we've got in the chat. So anybody that still has questions, get in there, put them in. But what is one key step that you take to ensure AI success? So Faye, quick fire, what would yours be?
Yeah. Don't believe the hype or LinkedIn hype. Go at your own pace. As long as you're moving forward and making progress, crack on.
Brill. Mike, your turn.
Show it to people. Build an MVP or even a POC or a lighthouse project. Show them, get them believing in the decisions and the results that you can have. Nick,
over to you. Oh, you're on mute. It's great, but we can't hear you.
New year, same problems. So I think for me, it's really ensuring that all of the AI work that you're doing is aligned to and demonstrates real ROI.
Brilliant. So we had a couple of extras here, but I'm going to move us straight across. You've answered these throughout the whole session onto just the final points of the Q&A. If we don't get to all of the questions or to answering them, we will follow them up and we'll pop those onto our website and get back in touch there directly. So first question is, how do you balance the environmental sustainability impact that the introduction of AI brings with the potential use case? Is it a case of getting the most bang for your environmental buck, or are there less environmentally impacting options? Who wants to pick that one up first?
I can go from a technical perspective because, stick up my hand and everything. Very luckily, we live in a world at the moment where cloud cost and latency and compute equals environmental impact. Cloud costs, latency, and compute are things clients and end users hate. So we are seeking to minimize time, latency, compute cycles, and cloud cost. And there's a whole bunch of steps that you have to take when you have a large language model product to do that, including like choosing the smallest possible model, caching things in advance, distilling models, using one to teach another, that kind of carry on. There are lots of technical steps you can take to make those things better experience for your end users. Happily, that also has a good impact on the environment.
Excellent. Chris Whitley, I hope that answers your question. If not, we can follow up on the chat on LinkedIn afterwards. Thank you for your question. Next one specifically for you, Faye, is how is your ITV data science team structured within the overall data function? Do you control the data platform directly, or are there any in-house customers of the ITV platform? Secondly, once you have developed a working model, how do you embed this effectively in the organization? So as much as you can without getting into all of the details.
I'll rattle through it. So data science sit in the business along with our data analysts and our market researchers, where the insights group, all of our engineers, data platform otherwise, sit under our CDO in tech. That kind of answers your question. They own the data platform. We productionize our own models and maintain them, but working closely with them. So it's a bit of a different way of looking at it. Once the models are built, A/B testing, value measurement, agile ways of working. So it's a continuous process. We don't just ship them and let them go. It's continuous process.
And that's the embedding side of it as well, because those people really get value from it and iterate as you go as well. Yeah, awesome. So final question. Thank you, Natalie Hayes, for that one. Final question then as we're up to time, and thank you to the panel, is as it was shared that prompt engineering will need to be engineered as per probably the roles created to support particular business process for which we will be using AI to automate. Does that mean that there needs to be an element of specialization in how we learn to prompt engineer based on roles, and do we have those kind of training in place?
I can probably try and answer that if I didn't totally understand the question, but if it's to do with prompt engineering specific to your role. So one thing we have at Data Literacy Academy for our internal LLM users is we have contextual documents that they can use. We have documents that I've prepared that capture who Data Literacy Academy are, what are we trying to do, what are our different departments. So I guess my advice there would be is prepare yourself contextual documents that speak to your company, your role, the function that you perform. But I would also encourage you to use a separate ChatGPT window. So for when it comes to prompt engineering, you want to think of AI use as layered, right? So I have a separate conversation in ChatGPT or Gemini that I use before I go into my prompting, which helps me to write the prompt. So I will quickly say to it, I'm trying to do this. The context is this is the thing I'm trying to solve. This is the thing I'm trying to do. Please help me write a prompt. And through that process, it helps me to write a prompt that is tailored to the actual objective that I'm trying to do. And then I get started by using that prompt to work on. So I think it's really just clarifying that yourself, but you can use AI to help you clarify that context. So
Shireen, I hope we've answered your question there. If not, we'll pop all of the answers to the questions and let the panel answer them offline. Thank you so much, panel. You've been phenomenal. So I hope, audience, you've had a great time listening to the expertise and the knowledge and wisdom of these great people. So have a lovely afternoon and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.